The courtroom was silent enough that even the light hum of the fluorescent bulbs felt loud. People shifted in their seats, murmuring quietly as an old man slowly stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he held the railing in front of him. He wore a faded red coat, the kind that looked older than most people in the room, and yet he wore it with the dignity of someone who had faced storms far greater than the judgment of men. His white hair was neatly combed back, though a few strands rebelled and hung loosely over his forehead. His face carried the marks of age, but more than that, it carried the marks of stories no one had bothered to ask about until now. In front of him, Judge Harrow sat with a stern expression, his gavel resting near his hand as if he expected to use it at any moment. On the right side of the courtroom stood a decorated military officer in a crisp blue uniform, medals gleaming under the lights. He seemed restless, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on the old man as if waiting for him to stumble. The tension between them was unmistakable. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Benson," he said sharply, "this court requires your statement. You have been silent for far too long. Speak up." The old man lifted his eyes slowly, as though the motion itself took effort. His voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I believe there has been a misunderstanding." The judge leaned forward, irritated. "If you can speak, speak loud enough so the court can hear you. This is not the place for games, old man." A few people in the audience exchanged uncomfortable glances. The officer stepped forward before anyone else could react. "Permission to address the court, Your Honor," he said in a loud, confident tone. Without waiting for approval, he turned slightly to the judge. "This man is refusing to cooperate. He has ignored orders, failed to appear when summoned, and remains defiant. I believe harsher measures should be considered." The old man closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. He did not interrupt. The judge glanced at him again. "Mr. Benson, do you deny the officer's statement?" Another whisper. "I do not deny the truth, Your Honor, only the meaning of it." A ripple of confusion went through the room. The officer scoffed loudly. "Meaning? You think you're above the rules? You think your age gives you excuses?" His words sliced through the air like cold steel. "Do you think you're above the law, old man?" The old man's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. He looked fragile, but there was something in his eyes that flickered, something sharp, something wounded, something far from weak. The judge tapped his pen impatiently. "Mr. Benson, enough with the cryptic responses. Speak clearly. Why did you refuse to come forward when the military called for you?" The officer folded his arms, confident he would win this battle with ease. The old man's voice cracked as he spoke, still quiet, but a bit steadier. "Because I have nothing left to give to war." A heavy silence filled the room. The judge frowned. "Explain." The officer shook his head vigorously. "He's exaggerating. He's trying to manipulate the court. These old veterans think that just because they served once, they don't owe anything anymore." The old man turned his head slightly toward the officer. Not with anger, but with something like sorrow. "Colonel," he whispered, "what is it you believe I owe?" The officer stepped closer, pointing a finger at him. "Your duty. Your loyalty. Your commitment to stand when called. We all swore the same oath." The old man nodded slowly. "Yes, I swore an oath. I swore it many times, in many battles. And every time I kept it." The officer opened his mouth to speak, but the old man continued before he could. "I kept it when my legs were shaking in the snow. I kept it when the sky fell in pieces of fire on my brothers. I kept it when the sound of gunfire tore through the night like thunder. I kept it when I watched men half my age die in front of me." His whisper somehow grew heavier, stronger than any shout. "Tell me, Colonel, how many times did you keep yours?" The room froze. Even the judge stopped breathing for a moment. The colonel's face reddened. "I have served Served, the old man repeated softly, looking down as though examining the word. Yes, serving is easy when the war is far away, when the danger is an idea, not a shadow that crawls beside you. The judge shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Benson, what exactly are you trying to say? The old man looked at him with a tired expression. Your Honor, I did not come to disrespect this court. I did not ignore summons out of arrogance. I simply reached the end of what a man can give. The officer stepped in again. He's lying. He refused to report for evaluation. We need every veteran available for the advisory program. The country depends on cooperation. He is obstructing national interests. The judge nodded slightly. Mr. Benson, you must understand the seriousness of this. The old man clasped his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear. From something deeper. Something older. Your Honor, I am not obstructing anything. I am only trying to survive what remains of me. The judge leaned back as if unsure how to respond. The colonel scoffed again. He's being dramatic. The old man raised his eyes slowly. Colonel, do you know what it's like to wake up every night screaming for men who have been dead for 40 years? The officer blinked, taken aback. Do you know what it's like to hear the sound of their footsteps behind you when you walk alone? To look in the mirror and see the faces of the ones you couldn't save? Do you know what it feels like when every loud noise sends your heart into battle again? The colonel's mouth closed tightly. I carry them, the old man whispered. Every day. Every night. And now. You ask me to carry more. No one breathed. The courtroom was utterly still. The judge's stern expression softened just a fraction. The old man continued, his voice trembling. I am tired, Your Honor. Not the kind of tired sleep can fix. The kind of tired that digs into your soul. The kind that makes breathing feel like lifting stone. A woman in the audience wiped a tear from her eye. The colonel clenched his fists. We don't choose when we're tired. No, the old man said softly. We do not choose. But we do break. And I broke long ago. I am only the pieces now. His words floated through the courtroom like a cold wind. The judge finally spoke again, quietly. Mr. Benson, what happened the day you were summoned? The old man lowered his gaze. I stood in front of the mirror. I wore this same red coat. I looked in my own eyes and tried to see the soldier I once was. He paused. But he was gone. All that was left was an old man who could barely hold the weight of his memories. The room felt smaller somehow. The colonel's anger dimmed, replaced by something like confusion. The old man took a slow breath. Your Honor, I did not refuse out of disrespect. I refused because I cannot fight anymore. Not on the field. Not in my mind. Not even in conversation. The judge exhaled, long and heavy. The colonel stepped forward again, but this time without the same force. But why didn't you tell us? Why not explain? The old man looked at him gently. Because, Colonel, soldiers are taught to be silent about their pain. The colonel's eyes flickered with uncertainty. The old man continued. We are taught that suffering is weakness. That fear is shameful. That wounds, whether on the body or the mind, must be hidden. His voice cracked again. And after hiding them for so long, I forgot how to speak. The courtroom felt as if it might break under the weight of his words. The judge looked down at his papers, then back at the old man. Mr. Benson, if you had spoken like this earlier, you could have spared yourself this hearing. The old man nodded. I know, Your Honor. But sometimes, the truth can only be spoken when a man is pushed to the edge. The judge sighed deeply. The colonel remained frozen, staring at the old man with a mixture of disbelief and something that looked dangerously close to guilt. The old man lifted his head, and for the first time his whisper held a strange kind of strength. I am not above the law, Colonel, he said. I am beneath it now. crushed under years you cannot imagine. And the courtroom remained silent as everyone realized the old man had finally spoken, yet his whisper carried more weight than any shout ever could. Asterisk. The silence in the courtroom stretched long enough that the judge had to look away, pretending to review the documents in front of him, even though everyone could tell he wasn't reading anything. The air felt heavier now, as if the old man's words lingered above their heads like ghosts refusing to leave. The colonel, once so confident and firm, now stood stiffly with his arms at his sides, uncertainty clouding the authority he usually projected. He cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly when he finally spoke. "Your Honor, with respect, we cannot simply dismiss a federal summons because of emotional difficulty." The judge raised an eyebrow at him. The colonel instantly regretted his choice of words. The old man did not flinch. His eyes remained lowered, but there was a calm acceptance in his posture, a man who had long stopped expecting mercy from the world. "Colonel," the judge said slowly, "are you suggesting that trauma from service is merely an emotional difficulty?" The colonel opened his mouth, but no words came out, not ones that would make him appear human, at least. He closed his mouth again and looked away, jaw tightening as if wrestling with something internally. The judge exhaled loudly. "Mr. Benson," he said, turning his attention back to the old man, "if you could tell this court exactly why the advisory board contacted you, perhaps we can understand the situation more clearly." The old man raised his head, eyes filled with a tired clarity. "They contacted me because I was the last surviving member of Battalion Echo 4. A quiet gasp ran through the courtroom. The colonel looked down. The judge blinked as if the name meant something familiar. "Echo 4," he murmured under his breath. The old man nodded. "Yes, the same battalion that was wiped out in one night. The same battalion that was sent where no battalion should have been sent." His whisper felt colder now, as though each syllable carried frost. "They want me to tell them what happened that night," the old man continued. "They want the details, the exact movements, the last transmissions. Everything." The judge watched him closely. "And why can you not give them that information?" The old man swallowed hard. His fingers tightened around the railing, knuckles turning white. "Because, Your Honor, I don't remember that night." The shock washed across the courtroom like a sudden wave. The colonel's head snapped up. "Don't remember?" he repeated, disbelief thick in his voice. "Sir, you were there. You were the only one who made it out. How can you not remember?" The old man shook his head slowly. "I woke up in a hospital 2 weeks after the attack. They told me I had been found half buried under debris with injuries no one expected me to survive. They said I had been unconscious, unable to respond to anything. When I woke up, there was nothing left in my memory from that night." The judge leaned forward. "Nothing at all?" The old man's eyes grew distant, as though searching for something in the darkness of his own mind. "Only flashes," he whispered. "Not enough to form a truth. Not enough to trust." The colonel took a step toward him, frustration growing again. "But the advisory board needs answers. The incident was never fully explained. There were questions about command decisions, about enemy tactics, about possible intelligence failures. We need your testimony." "Testimony," the old man repeated, almost to himself. "You ask me for what I do not have." "You survived," the colonel insisted. "Therefore, you must know something." The old man's gaze sharpened slightly. "Survival does not guarantee memory, Colonel. Sometimes the brain erases what it cannot survive." The colonel opened his mouth but hesitated. The judge cut in before an argument could reignite. "Mr. Benson, are you saying the board's investigation is forcing you to relive trauma you cannot remember?" The old man nodded slowly. "Every time they call me in, they put photos in front of me. They ask me to identify bodies. They ask me to relive the screams I might have heard. They asked me to recall the sounds of explosions, the smells of smoke, the sight of my friends dying. His voice trembled. But I remember none of it. Only the aftermath. Only the guilt of being the one who woke up when others never did. A young man in the audience covered his mouth, tears slipping down his cheeks. Even the judge, trying to maintain his composure, shifted awkwardly, face drawn with sympathy he was trying not to show. The colonel finally spoke again, but softer this time. "Mr. Benson, if you don't remember, then why did you avoid the summons rather than simply telling the board this?" The old man closed his eyes as if the question itself hurt. "Because, Colonel, they don't believe me. That sentence hung in the air like a blow. They believe I'm hiding something," the old man continued. "That I know some classified detail. That I am choosing to withhold the truth. They think I'm protecting someone. Or covering up something." The judge frowned heavily. "Is there any basis for their suspicion?" The old man shook his head. "None, but sometimes, Your Honor. The truth is too simple for people to accept. They think a mystery must have a complicated answer. But sometimes, there is simply nothing." The colonel looked conflicted, pacing slightly, his boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. "The board has pressure from higher authorities," he said finally. "They need answers to close the file." The old man's whisper sharpened. "At the cost of breaking what little remains of me." The colonel didn't reply. Couldn't reply. The judge finally looked at the officer. "Colonel, has the board considered psychological limitations?" The officer rubbed the back of his neck. They believe the memory might return with enough prompting." The judge narrowed his eyes. "Prompting? Do you mean interrogation?" The colonel stiffened. "Not interrogation, sir. Intensive memory recovery sessions." The judge leaned back slowly. "Which involve what, exactly?" The colonel hesitated. "Repetitive questioning. Exposure to stimulus. Audio recordings. Sometimes reconstructed scenarios." The judge's jaw tightened. "And you wanted to put this man through that again?" The colonel looked away. The old man's voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, I did not come here to fight them. I came because I thought maybe someone would finally listen." The judge stared at him for a long moment. "I am listening, Mr. Benson." The old man's eyes glistened with a hint of gratitude. "Then hear this, Your Honor," he whispered. "I am not defying the law. I am begging for mercy." The judge's throat moved as he swallowed. "Mercy from what?" The old man's whisper deepened. "From memories I do not have, and nightmares I cannot escape." The courtroom felt suffocating now, every person absorbing the weight of the old man's brokenness. The colonel slowly took a step closer, his tone softer than it had been all day. "Mr. Benson, do you really remember nothing?" The old man hesitated. For the first time, fear flickered clearly across his eyes. "I remember one thing." The colonel straightened. "What is it?" The old man's voice trembled violently now. "A sound, a sound?" The judge repeated. The old man nodded. "A scream. Not of terror, but of warning. Someone yelling my name." His breathing quickened. "It echoes in my dreams sometimes." The colonel asked softly, "Do you know whose voice it was?" The old man looked like he might collapse. "No, but it was the last voice I heard before everything went dark." A chill rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Could that scream be important to the investigation? The colonel looked unsure. Possibly, if it were from someone alive at the time. Maybe it indicates. The old man suddenly placed a hand on his chest, squeezing tightly as though the memory physically hurt. "Every time I hear it," he whispered, "I wake up shaking." The colonel's expression softened further. "Mr. Benson, if the board believed your memory loss was real, perhaps they would lessen their demands." The old man sighed. "Colonel, do you believe me?" The colonel froze. That question struck harder than any accusation. The officer opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at the old man, a man who once wore the same uniform he now carried proudly, a man broken by the same duty he claimed to honor. For once, he didn't speak like an officer. He spoke like a man. I don't know," he admitted quietly. The old man nodded. "That is the problem." The judge finally tapped his gavel lightly, not to demand attention, but to break the suffocating stillness. "This court will not allow coercion or psychological harm to any citizen," he said firmly. "Mr. Benson, until this matter is reviewed further, you are not required to attend any more sessions with the advisory board." Relief washed briefly through the audience. But the old man did not relax. The colonel straightened sharply. "Your Honor, Colonel," the judge interrupted. "I have made my decision." The colonel clenched his jaw, but something in him hesitated before arguing further. The judge turned to the old man again. "Mr. Benson, if you do recall anything or feel able to, this court will hear it on your terms, not under force." The old man bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor." But as the judge began to speak again, the old man suddenly swayed. The railing trembled under his grip. The colonel rushed forward before anyone else could react. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. The old man looked pale, his breath shallow. "The scream," he whispered. "It's louder." The colonel frowned. "Louder?" The old man nodded, eyes wide with fear. I think I'm beginning to remember something." A stunned hush filled the room. The colonel leaned closer. "What do you remember?" The old man opened his mouth, his lips trembling, but no sound came out. His eyes filled with terror. The judge shot up from his seat. "Mr. Benson? What is it?" The old man's voice finally escaped, a broken whisper that chilled everyone in the room. It wasn't a warning. His hands shook violently. It was a command. The colonel stepped back. "A command? From who?" The old man's face drained of all color. "From someone who shouldn't have been there." And with that whisper, the courtroom felt the ground shift beneath them all. The courtroom seemed to tilt for a moment, as if the old man's whispered revelation had bent reality itself. No one spoke. No one dared. Even the judge, a man known for his strict control and unwavering composure, stood frozen beside his bench, eyes locked on the trembling figure before him. The colonel took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Mr. Benson," he said, voice softer than it had been all day, "who gave the command?" The old man steadied himself against the railing, but his legs wobbled beneath him. His gaze drifted somewhere distant, as though he was staring into a memory that had long been buried under rubble and dust. "I don't know," he whispered. "Not yet." But the voice, it came from someone behind me. The colonel frowned. "Behind you? You mean from someone inside your battalion?" The old man's eyes twitched. "No, someone else. Someone higher." The judge exchanged a worried glance with the clerk. "Mr. Benson," the judge said carefully, "try to explain what you mean." The old man closed his eyes, visibly straining. His hands trembled so violently that the colonel reached out instinctively, stabilizing his arm. "Easy," he murmured. But the old man wasn't listening. His breathing grew shallow, his brow furrowed with the weight of something colossal. "The scream," he whispered again, "wasn't a scream of fear. It was an order. A sharp one. A command to fall back." The colonel blinked. "Fall back? But your battalion was ordered to hold position. Retreat was not authorized that night." The old man opened his eyes, and for the first time, there was a dangerous spark of clarity. "Exactly." Murmurs erupted in the courtroom. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, trying to maintain order. But even he couldn't hide his own curiosity now. "Mr. Benson," he said, leaning forward, "are you suggesting that someone issued an unauthorized command that night?" The old man shook his head slowly. "Not someone unauthorized. Someone hidden." Silence swallowed the room again. The colonel stepped back, confusion knitting his brows. "Hidden? Hidden where? Among your unit?" The old man looked down, his whisper barely audible. "No, hidden among command." The colonel stiffened. "That's impossible." The old man's weary eyes met his. "Is it?" The officer opened his mouth to argue, but the words died before emerging. Something in the old man's expression made him hesitate, something that didn't feel like delusion or manipulation. Something that felt like truth clawing its way out of a broken memory. The judge slowly sank back into his chair. "You said the voice wasn't familiar?" The old man nodded. "Not a voice I'd heard in battle. Not one of my men. Not my lieutenant. Not anyone stationed with us. It was firm, calm, almost whispering, but sharp enough to cut through explosions." The colonel rubbed his temples. "Mr. Benson, if what you're describing is real, it would mean someone higher in the chain of command illegally intervened in your battalion's orders. That would be treason?" The old man finished softly. The word hit like a grenade. People shifted, gasped, some even stood before being told to sit down again. The judge's knuckles whitened around his gavel. "Mr. Benson, accusations of this nature require absolute certainty." The old man nodded slowly, painfully. "I know, which is why I never spoke. Which is why I convinced myself I remembered nothing." The colonel stepped closer again, but cautiously this time. "Are you saying you suppressed the memory?" The old man's hands tightened on the railing. "I didn't suppress it. It broke me. And when something breaks you, the mind locks it away." The judge inhaled deeply. "Mr. Benson, please. Continue. What else do you remember?" The old man closed his eyes again, forcing himself into the abyss of recollection. Sweat formed along his brow. His breath hitched. And then his head jerked slightly as another fragment surfaced. "I remember the sound of metal," he whispered. "The sound of a radio channel switching manually. Someone overriding frequency access." The colonel's eyes widened. "Overriding? That requires classified clearance codes." The old man nodded, his breathing unsteady. "Yes, codes we never had. Codes no one at our level should ever have heard." The judge leaned forward slowly. "And yet you heard them?" "Yes, Your Honor," the old man said. "They buzzed through the receiver like static. And then the voice came." The colonel swallowed hard. "Can you remember the exact words of the command?" The old man pressed a shaking hand to his forehead, trying desperately to focus. "I think so." The judge nodded encouragingly. "Take your time." The old man exhaled slowly. "I heard. Echo 4, fall back immediately." The colonel frowned. "That doesn't match any documented transmissions from that night." "I know," the old man murmured. "It wasn't recorded. It wasn't meant to be." The judge's face darkened. "Are you insinuating intentional concealment?" "Your Honor," the old man said, looking up at him with haunted eyes, "that night wasn't a failure of intelligence. It was sabotage." The courtroom erupted again. The judge slammed his gavel down. "Order! Order!" People fell silent one by one. The colonel stared at the old man in disbelief. "Sabotage? By who?" The old man shook his head weakly. "I don't know. Not yet." The judge rubbed his chin. "Why would someone sabotage a battalion under their own command?" The old man's voice dropped even lower. "Because Echo 4 discovered something they shouldn't have." A chill slithered across the room. The colonel's expression hardened. "What did you discover?" The old man's lips trembled. "I don't know. Mr. Benson, I don't know." he repeated, louder this time, though still frail. All I remember is fear. Not fear from battle. Fear from knowing something was wrong. Something we were never supposed to see. The colonel hesitated. And you think that's why your battalion was wiped out? The old man's eyes glistened painfully. My brothers didn't die in battle, he whispered. They were silenced. Gasps filled the room again. The judge leaned back, stunned. The colonel shook his head hard. No, that's impossible. Why would command sacrifice an entire battalion? The old man stared straight into his eyes. To kill one truth. The judge swallowed. And you think you're the only one who survived because I wasn't supposed to. The colonel stepped back. But someone saved you. The old man nodded slightly. Yes, someone dragged me out of the rubble. Someone sent for extraction. Someone who disobeyed the order. Do you know who? The old man's voice cracked. No. His hands tightened into trembling fists. But I remember. A silhouette. Someone kneeling beside me. Someone whispering, "Stay alive." They can't know you're still breathing. The courtroom fell deathly silent. The colonel's face had drained of all color. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Benson, why would someone want to hide your survival? The old man lifted his gaze, eyes filled with raw pain. Because I heard the command. A long, suffocating quiet followed. The colonel paced slowly, mind racing. If all this is true, if someone at the top issued an illegal retreat order, if they orchestrated the ambush to erase Echo 4, then the advisory board. The old man finished for him. The board isn't investigating me. They're tracking what I might remember. The colonel stopped walking. You're saying they're afraid of you. Afraid of what I might reveal, the old man whispered. The judge pushed aside the papers on his desk, suddenly feeling that the documents meant nothing now compared to the truth bleeding into his courtroom. Mr. Benson, the advisory board requested your presence repeatedly. Do you believe they intended to force your memory out? The old man nodded. Yes, even if it broke me completely. Why? The old man looked down. Because someone up there knows the truth survived that night, and they want to know how much of it I can recall. The colonel clenched his fists. This could mean corruption at the highest level. The old man whispered, it means betrayal. The judge looked troubled. Very troubled. Mr. Benson, are you willing to undergo a protected evaluation? With the court's supervision, not the board's? The old man hesitated. I don't know if I can endure it. The colonel stepped forward, but something in him had changed. His tone softened with a respect he hadn't shown earlier. Mr. Benson, we're not the enemy. The old man looked up at him, studying him for a long moment. I don't know who is anymore. The judge exhaled deeply. Before this court decides anything, I need to ask one last question. The old man braced himself. Ask, Your Honor. The judge's expression turned grave. The voice you heard. The command to fall back. If you heard it again, would you recognize it? The old man froze. The courtroom held its breath. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. Yes, even after all these years? A voice that kills your brothers, he whispered, is never forgotten. The colonel straightened. The judge leaned back. And the old man's eyes, haunted, trembling, broken, stared forward as if hearing that command again in the silence. And then, somewhere in the back of the courtroom, a door creaked. The old man's head snapped up. His eyes widened with sudden terror. He whispered, barely audible, that voice. The colonel spun toward the sound. The judge stood immediately. The door opened further, and someone stepped inside. The old man's face turned white as bone. His whisper trembled like a dying heartbeat. It's him. And the courtroom plunged into a silence more terrifying than any scream.